Hi, my name is Lou Pinto. I'm from Gemini Logic. And what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is demonstrate for you how you can create a fixed commissions report using Analytics for Spire. Analytics for Spire is real-time reporting, which takes you from data to analysis in mere moments. One of the challenges that you may have on an ongoing basis is engineering, creating, and running ongoing reports that you may do on a month-end basis. One such report might be a commissions report. So let's use analytics to go ahead and create a fixed commissions report. It's a fairly simple and straightforward process. I've got the application presently launched. I'm in the sales analysis module, specifically in the details area, and this is where we're going to go ahead and create our commissions report. It's from here where we'll be able to see all of our invoice line details, all of your credit notes, and all of your invoices that are issued through order entry. Your first step is to go ahead and select the date range. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and grab data from April 1st, 2015 to the end of the month. So I just set my range, April 1st, 2015, and I'll end it on the last day of April, again, 2015. And so once I've established my start and end range, I need to then hit Get Data. So when I hit Get Data, it's at this moment in time that a SQL query statement is being generated. And the SQL statement is bringing together all the pertinent tables specific to the module that you're in. And we're in sales analysis. So what we're going to be looking at here is a listing of fields that are sourced from your invoice header, from your invoice detail level, from your customer record, your bill to and your ship to record, and also from your inventory record. When I hit Get Data, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner here, you'll see the number of records that were returned as part of this data set. So there's 200 invoice line details that we see based on that April 2015 date range. I've got some good columns. This is my default layout that's presented to me. I've got some good columns of information. Not all of them are specific to what I want to do with this particular analysis, and some columns are actually missing. So what I need to do is add some specific columns related to my commissions report. So to do that, I'm going to click on the Show Field Chooser, and that's listed right here under my Tools section. So here's a list of all the various fields that are available to you. And again, they're from your invoice record, they're from your customer record, and they're from your inventory record. And they're all sorted here in alphabetical order. At the very top, you'll see in parentheses UDF. So these are your user-defined fields. And again, these user-defined fields are sourced from your invoice, your customer, and from your inventory record. So they're all listed at the very top here. The balance of them are in alphabetical order. You'll see you've got some costing fields here, some pricing, address information. I'm going to go ahead and first select my back order quantity. In order to do that, all I need to do is simply just double click on the field, and then it automatically appends it to my layout. There's a whole host of fields here to choose from. When I counted them up the other day, there are 198 fields. So there are 198 fields right out of the box for you. And that doesn't include any user-defined fields that you may have already prescribed in Spire, and any custom fields that you may have created in a previous session of analytics. So I've got them on my back order quantity. I'm going to also add my order quantity, and I'm going to put my province code in here as well as my salesperson code. So those are the important columns and fields of information that I want to see in this particular layout. And when I go back to the layout and I look at this, I can see that there's some fields of information that are redundant or not specifically needed. So I can simply just drag and drop them right out of the grid. And to do that, all I need to do is just simply click on the field, hold the button down, and just drop the field out of the grid. And dragging and dropping is a universal capability within this application. So I'm going to remove the territory details and the salesperson details. And now I've got the columns of information that I want to see here. But what I don't have them ordered in the position that I want them to be in. So I can simply drag and drop the field of information into the particular spot that it needs to be in. So for example, I'm taking the salesperson and I'm moving that to the far left. So salesperson, I'm going to move my invoice date to the right of my invoice number. I like where my customer details information is. I like where the part number is and the part details. I'm just going to change the order of some of these quantities. So I'm going to put the commit quantity to the far right. I'm going to put the sell price total to the far right, and just move the back order quantity in the middle. And I'm going to move the province field to the right of customer. So now I've got everything laid out specifically how I want to see it, ending with my sell price total. So you'll notice my last two columns, at the very bottom of the column, you'll see a total in here. So that's a unique feature within analytics, is we allow you to create some summary values based on the field of selection. And all I need to do is just right click on that summary value, and you'll notice that you've got a series of different metrics that you can choose from. By default, the sum total is here for sell price total, but I could also add a min, I could add a max, a count, and an average if I wanted to, or I could simply remove it in its entirety. And I can do that with any one of these columns of information. So I like the sum total. I think that's a good value to put in here. I'm going to go ahead and add the sum under my order quantity as well. And for the part number, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the count metrics there. So now I've got a summary related to count. I've got a summary related to the totals. In the far right portion of the layout, you'll notice a blue bubble here, and it tells you the number of records that were returned in this data set. So there are 200 specific invoice line details that were returned as it relates to the start and the end date range that I chose. And you'll notice that equals the number of line items that are totaling on the part number. When I look at this, I see that I've got a whole bunch of records in here, but I've got some extra records that I don't want to include into this particular layout. I'm only going to be paying my external salespeople. So what I want to do is I want to remove my house account from this view. So to do that, all I need to do is just right click into the top right hand portion of my field, in the salesperson field in this case. And what I see here are the distinct values for my salesperson. So what I want to do here is I want to exclude my house account. So I'm going to change the criteria for this selection, and I'm going to change that to does not equal, and then I'm going to choose the distinct value of house account. And when I do that, what that affords me is the ability to go ahead and have any new salesperson added to this layout, because I'm excluding as opposed to including. And what you noticed was that in a snap, the grid modified the records to reflect the filter that's in place. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we can see that we're excluding our house account, and you'll notice that our count has changed from 200 to 68 records. So that's how you can filter on the fly. I still have resident in my data set 200 records, but my filtered layout is showing me only 68. So this is excellent. I've got the specific fields of information that I want to see. The next thing I want to do is I want to group this. So this is another characteristic of analytics that separates the details from just a simple listing. We see the report footer at the bottom, we see the ability to filter, and we've also got the ability to group. So I can take the salesperson code and I can drop it into my group ribbon just above my column header. And when I do that, what happens is the grid will snap up my result set and show me all of my Barry records listed first, followed by my David, my John, and then all the Mary records at the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my summary total under order quantity, and I'm also going to add my count total under the part number. So now I can see specifically what those counts and what those totals are for those two particular fields of information. So now I've got this nicely grouped. I've got the specific fields of information that I want. The next thing that I need to do is to come up with a formula field to determine what my commission rate is. So to do that, I can go ahead and use the wizard to create the custom field. And adding a custom field is a very straightforward process. If you've used Excel before and created formula fields, you should have no trouble creating formula fields in analytics. If you haven't created formula fields in Excel, you should be able to create formula fields in analytics quite easily. So I've got all the columns of information that I want to see specific to my layout. The one bit of information that is missing is what my calculated commission rate is. So to do that, what I need to do is create a custom field in analytics. And creating a custom field is a very straightforward process if you just follow the steps within our wizard. If you've created custom fields in Excel, this process will be very straightforward to you as well. So what we want to do here is create a calculated field based on our sell price total. So my first step is to go ahead and click New Custom Field. So I'm going to give the field a field name, and this is going to be my fixed commission rate. And then I'm going to caption it appropriately. So captioning it is how I will see this in my list and how I will see it in my layout. So this is going to be my fixed commission, 15%. That's what my title is going to be. And my next step is to create the data type. So this is going to be a currency field based on a calculated value based on a math formula. So I've got my name, I've got my caption, I've got my data type, and now I have to click on the expression editor, which will help me formulate exactly what this formula field is going to calculate. So the expression editor now will present itself And what I can do here is I will select the specific field of information that I need to see. So I've got all of my columns, and again, these are listed alphabetically. So I see in here not only my special fields within analytics and my standard fields that are in analytics, but I also see my user-defined fields and any other custom fields that I've made in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and search this out. I'm looking for my sell price total. So there's sell price total. I'm just going to double click on it. And when I do, you see that it automatically populates at the top here. The next thing I want to do is to do a calculation. So I select the operator, and I'm going to select the multiplication image. And then you'll notice already analytics is trying to help you with some guidance in terms of how you're formulating your field. And it's telling you that it's missing something to the right of where the star is or where my multiplication value is. And that's my commission rate. In this case, it's going to be 15%. So 0.15, I type in that value, and you'll notice everything goes green and my syntax error disappears. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and then apply, and then save. And when I do that, what will happen is analytics will automatically append to my layout my fixed commission rate. So now I can see what my fixed commission rate is, and I can save this layout, and then I can draw from it at the end of the month. So I've got all the information in here, and what I can do with this layout is I can export this into various formats, one of which is a PDF format. And with the PDF format, I can create attributes such that the salesperson details don't lead from one salesperson rep to another. And again, the whole concept of saved layouts is a very good one in analytics. For example, I've got here a variable commission rate. And if I'm happy with my date range, all I need to do is just simply load that particular layout here. So when this loads up, it'll show you specifically how that layout presents itself. So I've just collapsed my view in here so I can gain just a little bit more real estate. So here's a variable commission rate that's variable based on a couple of different attributes, one of which is the salesperson. So the salesperson, depending on who you are, will get a specific rate. So you'll notice here that Barry's getting a rate of 7.5% and 15%, 10 and 20, 25, and then 15 and 30 for Mary. So Barry's getting a rate not only as Barry himself, but there's also a rate that he gets if he works with an additional salesperson. And the additional salesperson is one of those user-defined fields that we created on the invoice record. So that rate is something less than it would be if you worked alone. So 7.5 if he's with somebody else, 15 by himself, and then 10 and 20 for David, and then John was working by himself primarily, and he gets 25, and then 15 and 30 for Mary. So the rate is variable, and it's variable based on the criteria that I selected here based on the salesperson code and the presence of an additional salesperson. But there is a lot of flexibility in terms of how you could create a variable commission rate. If you wanted to create one based on a product code or a part number or a customer or a volume number or a total dollar amount, you could do that as well. It's whatever you can place into an if statement or into a case statement to come up with that specific rate. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and collapse all of this so you can see what the specific totals are related to this particular month. So I can see Barry, David, John, and Mary were responsible for sales in this amount for the month of April in 2015. And while that number in and of itself is good and it's important to know when it comes to creating a commissions rate, what would be far more interesting to discover is to see what that number is relative to previous months or previous years that have passed. And to do that, you can go into the sales analysis summary, because it's in the sales analysis summary where you can take a total and then you can cross total that. So let's go ahead and show you how you can do that. So as is the step with all these modules, you go ahead and set your date range. So I'm going to go back to 2015, and I am going to end on 04/30/2016. So we're going to pretend that today is April 30th, 2016. So again, I set my date range, my start and end, and then I go ahead and hit Get Data. And when I do that, what happens is data is presented in a slightly different format than we saw in the details. I'm just going to collapse this module down here so you can see specifically what this looks like. So here is our default layout in our sales analysis summary. And what I'm looking at is a listing, a subtotal of all of my sales over that period of time by customer details. So this is the customer number and the customer name. Details is one of those special fields where we bring together both the code and the description as it relates to a specific field. So you'll see that on part number, you'll see that on product code, you'll see that on territory, you'll see that in various places throughout analytics, wherever you see a code field. So this is showing you what the subtotal is by customer, and then it's breaking that subtotal down by the invoice date month and by the invoice date year. So you're seeing that total broken down into multiple values. And there's lots of columns of information here. So I'm just going to simplify this view for us so that we can see the information. So I'm going to take the invoice date month and I'm going to drop it into my holding area here, so it's no longer in my grid. And now what I can see is a listing of all of my customers. I can see what the sales are in 2015. I can see what the sales are in 2016. And by default, this sort is by customer details in alphabetical order. Not exactly the best of sorts when you're doing an analysis of sales. So what you can do in analytics is you can choose a specific column and then you can choose to sort by a certain field, what a field that's in play, in this case, customer details. So when I hit customer details and I do my sort, I'm sorting it by grand total. Now I can see specifically what my sales were in each of those years, 2015 to 2016, and what those numbers are. But if you recall, I started from January 1st, 2015, and I went out to April 30th, 2016. So I'm actually showing 12 months worth of data in 2015, and I'm only showing 4 months worth of data in 2016. So it's not really a good apples to apples comparison. So what I can do is I can filter on the fly. Just as you saw me filter on the fly in the sales analysis detail, I can also do that in the sales analysis summary. And I can do that by fields that are not necessarily in play here on my grid. So I'll go back into my invoice date month, and what I can do, let me just move this field down here so you can see specifically what I'm looking at. So there's invoice date month, and I can see what the distinct values are. So the 12 months of the year, I'm going to uncheck everything and then select just my first 4 months. And when I do that, my totals will change. You'll see my filters in play down here, invoice date month, January, February, March, and April. I'm going to remove my customer details. I'm going to replace my invoice date month now into my row total. And now I can see what's displayed here are only those first 4 months. So you may be saying to yourself, you had invoice date month up here in the column and now you've put it into the row. And this is the wonderful thing about analytics, is that there is no real wrong answer in terms of where you place a field, a row or column. It's just relative to specifically what you're trying to look at. And in this case, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a sense as to what my sales were in each of those months, looking at each of those distinct years, 2015 to 2016. And I can see specifically what they are in each of those months. What I can also do with that, and I just revealed for you the bottom panel in here, which is my dynamic grapher, I can graph out what my results set looks like. So to do that, all I need to do is hit the control key and start selecting various cells of information in here. So what I want to see first is what my sales line is in 2015. So to do that, I just simply select the cells, and you'll notice now my sales line is now building in here. So I can see how I did in those first 3 months. I select the 4th month, and now I can see exactly how I did in the year 2015. And that's great information as it relates to 2015. I can see that relative to 2016, again, by selecting the control key and now picking the specific cells of information. So I see my 2016 line is slowly building there. It's flat, then it rises, falling in line similar to 2015. And then I notice in 2016, I've actually got an uptick in sales. So again, this is great information, and it's really good to look at things from the perspective of a closed month. So this is a scenario in which we are at the end of the month, and then we're looking at what our sales information is. What probably even more valuable to you is to take a look and see how you might be trending within the month, and look at that from the perspective of a year to date. And you can do that in analytics very easily with some of these date ranges, and that's using the primary and secondary date range. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to select my date range of January 1st, 2016, and I want to do a comparison. I'm going to pretend today is April 14th. So my end date will be April 14th, 2016. And what I want to do is I want to see how I'm trending this year to date compared to the previous year to date. So to do that, I set my primary range, and then I hit the secondary date range. And what happens is analytics will take this primary date range, net it out by a year, and it's going to show me what those numbers are in the previous year to date. And then I'm going to hit get data. And when I do that, my result set is going to change. And what I notice is that in mid-month, for 2016, my numbers are I'm going to remove this filter. My numbers and my trend line is showing a trend that's rather dangerous. I'm trending very low in sales. I'm doing as poorly as I did in 2015. But because I'm using this as a saved layout and I'm looking at this on an ongoing basis, analytics is giving me the opportunity to look at my data and to make a data-driven decision. And I can now respond to the point where I can make those right decisions so that I can salvage the 2016 month. I can do things such as I can pull orders ahead. I can get my salespeople to better engage with my customer. I can threaten a price increase. I can put things on sale. I can do a whole host of things in order to bring my sales back up, so that if we fast forward to the end of April, we'll notice that when we do our comparison with our secondary date range, and I go ahead and grab data, however I responded on April 15th, I was able to save my month such that you'll notice that I'm actually trending upwards. So that's a really good way of proactively looking at your sales and to make those data-driven decisions based on what your sales are. So I've been dragging and dropping fields of information and looking at things from a very high-level perspective. I'm just going to collapse this panel here. And what I'd like to do is take you back to where we were first talking about that salesperson code. So I'm going to take the invoice date month out of my grid. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with the salesperson code. So now what I see is a list of all of my sales by salesperson, and I can see what that number is in 2015, 2016. If I put the invoice date month back in here, I can do an extra grouping in here. So I can see what Barry's sales are. I can see what they were in January 2015. By comparison, I can see what they are in 2016. And similarly, what his total is. I can change the order of this. Again, this is all has to do with perspective. If I want to start with the salesperson and look at what their sales were in each of those months, I can see that. Or alternatively, I want to look first from the perspective of the month and then see how each of my individual reps are doing. I can do that as well simply by changing the order of those fields. So that's how you can group and multi-group with fields. I'm going to just take the salesperson code out of here, and I'm going to go in here and introduce my filter where I'm going to remove my house account. Now hit OK, and now I can see specifically what my sales are for each of my reps for each of those months. I'm going to go back and reintroduce my graphing capability, and I'm going to see what these sales look like from a graphical perspective. So again, I'm hitting my control key, and I've got my 2015 and my 2016 line that's developed here. And this is a line chart, and this line chart isn't terribly revealing. Not all of these graphs are things that might make sense to you. So the wonderful thing about analytics is that we allow you to look at your data from multiple graphical formats. So I can take a look at the pie chart, and what this will do is show me what my distribution of sales are by rep. So I can see now in 2015 that Barry had the blue piece of pie, and in 2016 his piece got a little bit bigger, and as a result, my individual reps, their overall a piece of the pie and distribution of sales was slightly less as Barry started to garner more sales. And then I can click into my bar chart. When I click at my bar chart, now what I'm doing is I'm looking at each of my individual reps, and I can see what the specific sales are in 2015 and 2016. So I can see that Barry is indeed my superstar with a huge increase of sales year over year. But I also notice that David is also trending upwards, as is Mary. And unfortunately, John is going downwards. So this is how you can look at your sales analysis in a graphical format with different chart formats, pie chart and bar chart. I'm just going to collapse this so that we'll go back into our grid here. And again, this is good information. It tells you specifically who's up and who's down. But what's missing here, and what you can see is specific differences. But you can get that information from analytics. We have a field that's called a sell price plus minus. And if I introduce that into the grid, now I can see specifically what the difference is between those 2 years. So I can see how much Barry's gone up, how much David and Mary have gone up, and I can see that John has gone down to a certain point. And this is good, and it tells me what that difference is. I can actually introduce some formatting into this grid as well. If I right-click, I can introduce a rule that I've already created which tells me what my sell price total is. And if it's anything less than 0, I'll go ahead and hit apply. And when I do that, I notice now I can see visually that John is down, and he's down by 18,000. And I can get rid of some of these totals as well. Under my tools section here, I can hide my column total, and now I just have my row total in here. And now I can see specifically what those sales were. And I've been dragging and dropping fields up in here from my holding area, and these are the fields of information that I would most commonly put into my grid. But there are a host of other fields that are also available in here, and I can see them when I hit the Show Field List. So the Show Field List is not unlike that column chooser, where we have a whole list of different fields of information that we can choose from. And there's even more than the 198 that we saw in the column chooser here. We've got some really good calculated fields, ones that can look at it from the perspective of cost. So I'm just going to take the sell price total of plus minus for a minute here. Now I'm looking at this strictly from sales, but if I introduce the average cost total in here, now I can see what my sell price total is. So this is what I sold it for, and this is what it cost me. I can also look at what my profit is as well. So there's another key metric that I like to report on. So I can look at sales, I can look at costs, I can look at profit, and I can even look at margin if I wanted to. So here's my margin as it relates to average gross profit. So some really good fields to look at from revenue from analysis, from cost analysis, from profit analysis, and they're all listed in here. And again, we can see some of our address information. There's a backorder quantity. I can put in commit quantity. That's one of my commonly used fields that I placed in my holding area, but I can drop that into my data area. Now I can see the specific units that were shipped. I can also look at my gross profit and my cost from a current cost calculation. I put the average cost in there. And again, I've got all of my other different fields of information here. I've been looking at things from an invoice date year and an invoice date month perspective, but I can also look at it from a fiscal perspective as well. So there's a fiscal year, fiscal period, and fiscal quarter, and some more of my invoicing details as well. Here are some of my user-defined fields that are in red, and salesperson, and right down to the warehouse field. So a whole bunch of different fields to choose from. I'm going to restate my grid. So I'm going to take information out of my data area. I'm going to put it into my filter area. And now I'm just looking at sell price total, and I'm going to reintroduce my sell price total plus minus so I can see what my difference is. And you'll notice that my formatting persists. So here I am looking at all of my sell price totals and what that difference is. Now let me go back to my show field list. I wanted to add a new field in here. So I can take this ABC customer and I can put it to the right of the salesperson. So now what I'm looking at, and again, this is one of those user-defined fields that I defined on my customer record. I'm looking at Barry's sales, and I can isolate on him by collapsing everything and just looking at Barry specifically. And I can now hide the row total here because I don't need to see specifically what his total is. But now I see Barry. I can see that while his numbers overall are up, let me put that total back in there. I can see his numbers overall are up. I can see that's mainly attributed, or it's exclusively attributed to his sales that are occurring in the A customer list. So I've got my B and my C customers for Barry. You'll notice that he's got no sales in here, and that's also presented to me visually by the fact that that value is in red. That's looking at the customer. I can look specifically at the customer details themselves. So you'll notice I've got the A customer, I've got the B and the C customer. Now I can see specifically that customer, and I can see how they're trending. I can also go dig that into my part number. So I'm hierarchically looking at all of my information, starting first with my rep, then breaking it down. I'll collapse everything in here, then breaking it down by a specific component of an ABC customer. I can isolate on my B customer, and those are the customers, those are the parts. I can put the product code in between the customer number and the product number. And again, so I'm seeing all my information. I can save this layout. And in fact, I've probably over the last 10, 15 minutes, we've created about 10 or 15 different reports. For example, here's a report where I'm looking at my key metrics, where I'm looking at a user-defined field, the pricing, the profit, the gross profit, the units shipped. Here's a different layout, and I'm just selecting specific layouts that I've saved in the past. So I've only had to construct these once. This is looking at the province, and it's looking at the distribution of sales. It's looking what the percentage of the row total, so which of my provinces I garner the most sales from, and then what my average gross profit is, and then what the difference is. Here's my sales by rep. And again, looking at Barry customer part number, and again, looking at the 2-year totals. Here's my sales year over year, month to month, and now I'm looking at month over month, and I'm seeing what the difference is between the two. Here's an ABC analysis on my rep, and we saw that a little bit earlier. Here's an isolation that I'm doing just based on April sales. So on our sales analysis detail exercise, we were able to come up with these numbers, and we saw what those totals were. And here's a comparison of the 2016 numbers, and we can see what the difference is between those two totals. So a whole host of different layouts that you can choose from, save them and draw from them. Great information, trend analysis that you can look at in the summary view, specific details and layouts that you can look at in the sales analysis details view. That's it for now. Thank you for listening.